I'm Sonia, a personal brand and style coach. My journey began in the corporate world and through lived experiences has led me where I am today. I've walked in those uncomfortable shoes, faced the same challenges and questioned my path to professional success while simultaneously navigating my personal style journey and the challenges that each decade brings. I wholeheartedly believe in the fusion of personal brand and style strategy. My mission here is to provide you with practical, actionable strategies and lived experiences to help you unlock your next level of success through the power of personal brand and style. Let's get started.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another Style and Strategy podcast. Today I'm taking a slightly different tweak to the podcast because I am all about showcasing the fact that you are so much more than just your title, so much more than your brand as well as your style. You are a multifaceted individual. And so as part of that, many of us are also mums and many of us are working mums as well. So introducing Belinda Joyce, your trusted companion on the Midwife in Your Pocket podcast. With over 2 decades of expertise as a midwife and maternal health nurse, Belinda has supported thousands of families through pregnancy, newborn care, and beyond. As a mother of 4 herself and author of Survive and Enjoy Your Baby, she intimately understands the journey of parenthood, the highs of bonding with your newborn to the challenges of sleepless nights and feeding struggles. Let me introduce you and join Belinda as she shares her wisdom, compassion, and practical advice to help you navigate those early years of parenting with confidence and joy. Belinda, welcome to the Style and Strategy podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, Belinda, why don't we kick off a little bit around how you think working mums can really deal with that first stage of, let's say, if they are finding out that they're pregnant and they're really challenged and, everyone gets scared about going and having that conversation with their managers and so forth. And you really start thinking then straight away to the cot and all these things that are going to happen sort of 9 months down the track. What are your sort of experience around that, and what should we be really thinking about at that early stage?
I think early on, everyone's thinking about when is the right time to tell everyone. And I think the majority of people wait till around the 12-week mark when they feel that the pregnancy is going well, they're healthy, they're feeling a little bit better. But that also means that they've got about 3 months of feeling totally exhausted because they're making a human being, but not feeling like they can tell anyone about the challenges that are going on for them at that time. So I think, early nights, trying not to overwhelm themselves, keeping work as simple as possible and just doing what you have to do and then coming home and resting is really, really important in those first few months. And then when you're able to start telling people, it all becomes very obvious what's happened in those previous couple of months. And by then, usually people have started realizing.
Definitely. I think, having that support at home and sort of the family and everyone during those first few months is absolutely critical. I can remember walking around to meetings, walking around with dry crackers at every meeting, trying to hold it together while I was feeling extremely ill at the time.
Dry crackers are fantastic. And another little tip would be fruit-tingle lollies or something similar, because they've got that fizzy, an effervescence or something to them that it really can help take away those feelings of nausea.
Oh, okay. I'd never heard the fruit-tingle one. See, where were you when I needed you? And so, we start to go through these mind shifts as you come along that pregnancy sort of journey. And part of that mind shift is you are focused on bub and what's happening in that space, especially if it is if you're first. But along that journey, we get a little bit challenged around once we've told people, especially your boss or things like that, sometimes there's a perception you might have internally that people think, oh, well, she's going to be distracted now, or she's going to be, not focused on her work anymore. Have you had any experiences or examples where you've heard that from others as well?
Oh, absolutely. Many women will say that there's a perception that they're not up for the job anymore now that they're pregnant, and which is, of course, not the case. Pregnant women and mothers, very great at still doing all of their jobs, but there's extra, I guess it's like a project, isn't it, on the side that's happening in your personal life, and it does flow into your work as well. But I would have to say that women who are preparing to have a baby or after returning to work, they often become much more productive because they're trying to fit everything in. They get extremely good at prioritizing because they have to. There's no choice. So it can actually be a real benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say it's a ruthless prioritization, isn't it?
Yes.
And so when they are as they get through that end stage, what's some advice that you would give sort of that working mum who's starting to think about, okay, I need to, at least 4 weeks before, I believe it is from memory, you have to let your sort of employer know that your intentions around what sort of time frame you're looking at taking off for maternity leave and so forth. Yeah. Is there any guidelines or advice that you would give at that stage at what they should be considering?
Yes, I think it's really important that they think about what sort of return to work they're wanting to have. So some women will say, I'm just going to take 6 weeks off and return soon after. Many will take more like 6 months or even think of taking a year. I often say to people, and it's worth having a little look at your agreement that you're under for work. We're all under different agreements as well. But often you can take, say, 6 months, but then continue to extend that to a year or sometimes even 2 years. And because you're not sure yet what you're going to want to do. So at this point, before you even birth your baby, you might think you're going to want to go back to work very quickly. But when you meet your baby, that can all change. I've seen many women decide to take longer. I have seen the flip side of that as well, where people have put in for 12 months maternity leave straight away, and then they've had their baby and they've wanted to go back sooner, and that can be problematic, especially if they've backfilled your position with somebody else. So I think it's sometimes a good idea just to take a smaller amount of time than what you think you will want and then look to extend that down the track.
Great advice actually there. So normally right up to that 4 weeks or so before your due date, a lot of the time, all you're thinking about is the cot, the nursery, maybe, take home clothes, the birth, that type of thing. And there is a whole other world that kind of happens afterwards, especially for those who are first-time mums out there. What are some of the things that people are likely to forget about and should be starting to really prep for?
Mm-hmm. So I think there is a massive focus on setting up the nursery, which is important, and the birth. Getting the baby out becomes a massive focus, and it's hard for it not to be because you're getting larger. You've got that tummy and you're feeling your baby move so much. But the reality is the birth is really important, but for most people it's one day. Whereas after the baby is born, you've got a baby to care for 24 hours a day for many, many years ahead. And there's a lot to learn for most new parents. So mums and dads, there's so much to learn, especially if you haven't been around babies and young children a lot yourself, and if it's your first. So all the learnings around that first week when you get home, feeding, whether you're choosing to breast or bottle feed, how to care for a newborn baby, sleep and settling is a huge one. It's normal for newborns to need to feed, really frequently and to cry very often, and for that to increase over the first 6 weeks of life. Just when you sort of think it should be getting easier, it gets a bit harder. And so there's huge amounts of information to learn as a new parent. And if people can start learning that before the birth, it would be really helpful and set them up for a much smoother beginning to parenthood.
Yeah. And I think, the words of, I think many of us that have been there and done that is no one told me or prepared me or could have actually really prepared you for that moment after baby's kind of born, right?
Yes.
But actually, and back in my day, it was that lovely thick book, what to expect when you're expecting and no, not the movie. The actual book was all we kind of had. And I remember having that tabbed, but the experience of going through it and talking to others around it and experts like yourself, Belinda, makes such a difference in this day and age. So maybe you can tell me a little bit around some of the support, because I know you've written a book and I think titled, Surviving, because that's what it actually is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and how that kind of came to be and where you've taken that from now?
I wrote the book because many of the books that were out there were written by people who didn't have any qualifications. So their heart was in the right place and they really wanted to help future parents. But what was written in the books was often unrealistic, wasn't really backed up by the evidence. Some of it wasn't even safe. And I thought, I want to put a book out, the sort of book I wish I had when I had my baby. When I took my baby home from the hospital, I hadn't been around babies that much and I wasn't a midwife yet. I was a nurse, but I wasn't a midwife and I didn't have any skills in that area. And I wanted the book to have options and present lots of useful information that you could just look up a section if your baby was crying and go to that section and get a whole heap of strategies to try to soothe them, because let's face it, if your baby's crying, that's what you're after at the time, something to soothe your baby and to try and figure out what's wrong. And so I set the book up in a way that people could just get to what information they needed rather than read it from the beginning, because, we're all busy people and it's important to pinpoint the stuff that we need at the time. And then from the book, I've got a blog and I've got my own podcast, Midwife in Your Pocket, and I've also got an online community, the Baby Circle, where we really support new parents, mainly mums, in that sort of pregnancy and early parenting right up to, caring for a newborn baby and up to even a toddler.
Love that. Now that I reflect back, I think there was 5 years of my life where I lost sleep completely. And so trying to operate at work on very little sleep, a lot of caffeine at the time to hold me together, but trying to read every book under the sun, trying to understand how do I make my child actually sleep through the night was probably one of my biggest challenges. And, like you said, being able to go somewhere, a resource, we can just go, look, I need to know this and I need to know it now. And again, if I could have a community to say, help, please.
Yes.
I need to, do a massive presentation and I need my child to sleep. But I kind of forgo that for 5 years or so.
It's so hard, that sleep deprivation, but it's one of the things we know nearly all parents are going to have to go through.
Yeah. So thinking about sort of support systems at home and around, and even in that return to work phase, what are you seeing as sort of the best options out there at the moment?
So I think a community is really important, and we know it takes a village to raise a child, and everyone says that, but it's actually true. And that village is different for every family. So you might have family that are close by, extended family, but many of us don't in this day and age. We've moved away. And so then it's looking around at, making connections with other parents, close friends, and then even looking at the support systems around families. So that might mean great childcare services. That might mean fantastic cleaning services that can come in and clean your house or help with that. There's fabulous meal delivery systems. There's all sorts of jobs, I guess, that we used to do ourselves that we can now get help with, and even down to laundry services, nappy services if you're using cloth nappies or even the modern cloth nappies. And we don't have to do it all ourselves. And I think particularly with return to work, that's a time where you've really got to be kind to yourself. It is a juggle. And I think by using some of those services, you can really make it much easier for yourself.
I think that's a really important point there, because sometimes as women, mums, we want to do the best in everything that we do. I know so many women who are high achievers and they bucket into that. Well, therefore, I've got to maintain my personal presence, my brand, my everything that's happening with Bub. I've got to hold everything together and make sure the house is clean and everything else. And yet I think being able to know that you've got these other services, you can lean on that. And you know what? It's okay. You're not supposed to. You've just birthed this child. You are trying to head back into work as well. And, give yourself that time, give yourself that slack to, get back into the swing of things. It is going to feel so different to how it was before. And I think maybe just on that, it's, you've got experiences across separation with your child in whether that's daycare, it's changes to your body. It really isn't going to feel like it was before. And, I think there's a raft of other things there. So thinking about that, what else are you seeing as some of those challenges that mums are being facing into as they return to work, and some of the tips you'd kind of give around that as well?
Sure. So I think returning to work, the word that always comes to mind and that women say to me over and over again is that it is a juggle. So there really is that juggle of prioritizing what's really important. And that's why I often go to looking for other services outside the house that can help you, because most mums, like you were saying, we want to be super mums. And I don't know why we want to do that, but most of us do. And we look back at what our mums may have done for us, and that's what we think is necessary. But in many cases, our mums weren't returning to work as soon or for as many hours a week, or in some cases at all. And so we can't expect to be able to do the same as what they did. And actually, it doesn't make us a better mum for stretching ourselves that thin. It's really important that we look after ourselves, and it really is that analogy of putting our own oxygen mask on first, because we can't be a good mum if we're stretched too thin. So I think with return to work, we've got the piece of getting help and support, and then we've got that separation piece really is important to talk about, because it could be the first time that we're separated from our baby for more than a short amount of time. An 8-hour day is significant. And if there's travel on top of that, it can sometimes be more like 10 hours between seeing your baby and then returning to them. So that's really huge. And as much as many of us love our jobs as well and our roles, it can be really hard moving away from your baby for that amount of time, particularly right at the beginning. What you'll often find is that they have a wonderful time when you're not there, and they're not missing you as much as you think that they might, but it still really pulls at the heartstrings, and it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think being able to give yourself that space, and that it's okay, it is going to feel very different to anything you've experienced before. And the juggle of being able to sort of run to work after you've dropped the kids off, make it back in time. And I think also there's this element mentally of I've got to leave work early. We're very lucky. I think times have changed a lot since I was in early employment, where it felt like you had to be seen at work and do all that sort of thing. A lot of businesses have now moved on from that. And so that being able to get to daycare on time or leave a bit earlier so that you're not picking up, really, really late, which also then adds more pressure onto your family life as well. So where you have that flexibility, I think it does help the family unit as a whole as well.
That flexibility piece is huge now compared to, pre-pandemic, for instance. We have learnt to become much more flexible, and workplaces have as well. And that has been so good for families, for all parents. It can just be a little bit tricky and become a double-edged sword in that, our devices can all come home with us and we can keep working into the evening, which sometimes has to happen, but it's good to have some boundaries there as well for your own health and well-being.
Yeah, definitely. I know I have ticked over both ends of the scale. So I think, really, really important to remember that along that journey. So then if I think about balancing that sort of those demands of your career and wanting to kind of move forward still, but whilst, looking after Bub, whether that's one or two at home or things like that, what's some of your experiences being, a mum to four, personally being able to juggle your career whilst actually, still successfully? And I know that your daughter's getting married as well, so pretty exciting times. What's some advice that you would give anyone in those early stages?
I think the biggest piece of advice is that it's okay if your career is on hold a little for a short amount of time. And I do understand it depends what industry you're working in. Particularly, I know some industries where there's a lot of research involved and things like that, they really aren't able to put their work on hold for very long. But there's many industries where they can. I was lucky enough that I was working at the hospital as a midwife for most of that time. And I was able to work some fairly flexible hours and, which included night duty and all sorts of things that you do around the family. But it was really helpful being able to do that, and for my husband to be able to parent quite a lot when I wasn't there. And that was great for him and his relationship with our children as well. For most of the time that my children were little, I was also studying. So I was a registered nurse before the first baby, and then after the second baby I went back and became a midwife. Then after the third baby I went back and became a maternal and child health nurse. And so I was always studying up to sort of that master's level, which kept me very busy, but I loved it. So I still was moving ahead in my career, but it was more gradual, and it was, I guess I was catching up in those little pockets all around my family time, but I wasn't gone too much.
Yeah. And I think there's elements around that. It's we hear it all the time, but it is so true. It is about the quality of that time together, that you kind of, as you said, there's ruthless prioritization that happens. And then it's blocking out those times where, now with devices and stuff, it's the phone's down, it's dedicated time, and spending that and really enjoying that time together. And I would say also from my perspective that being able to just stop and really enjoy the time that you've got, it will be okay. Again, depending on the career choice, etc., but taking that time out, whether that's 3 months for you, whether that's 6 months, whether that's 12 months, or whether that's longer, being able to take that break and enjoy it, because that time goes very, very fast. And then before you know it, they'll be 12, 13, and then into their teens and 20. And you will look back and think, wow, when did that actually all happen?
And I love the fact that my children have seen me do all of those different things throughout their early childhood, because they know anything is possible. And they know that they definitely know that we had lots of that quality time as well. And I think some mums or parents are much better parents if they're moving ahead in their careers, which is one of the things that they absolutely love. And then there's other parents who are better if they're a fully stay-at-home parent. So there's no right or wrong, and everyone has to find where they sit on that continuum.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, Belinda. It's absolutely the case that you need to find out what's right for you and then go with that. And you can test and trial and learn until you do and you find that right balance for what you're looking for. Love it. Okay, so now as I start to wrap up, I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions. And so the first one being, given that it's the Style and Strategy podcast, what would be your signature style piece that you fully believe represents your personal brand and is probably an essential part of your wardrobe?
So I think the thing that comes to mind most is that I like to keep my clothing and my style quite simple. And I feel like that is because I've got 4 children, and over the years I've had to be able to get up, get dressed, get out of the house without too much effort. That sounds terrible, doesn't it, on a style podcast? But I've kind of hovered around, it's terrible. I could have made my own uniform, I think, but I hover around the black pants or jeans and then a top of some sort, which often has pops of pink in it. I really do like pink, and it is a brand colour for me as well.
Yay.
But I do try and keep it fairly simple.
But I love that. It's keeping it simple. If that is what works, so it makes it easy for you, then that is why it's an essential part of your wardrobe. Now, transformational read. So for our listeners looking for inspiration, what book are you either currently reading or listening to that has had a significant impact on you, whether from a personal brand or a leadership perspective?
I have just finished the book, The Big Leap, and I loved it because it really tries to push those boundaries of what you think is possible in your life and in your career. And I think we can always look to extend those boundaries. It's a fabulous book. You should all read it.
Yeah, I have to echo that. I keep walking around going, oh, is this an upper limit issue or not? And then finally, mindset ritual. So we all have those days when we need an extra boost. What's your quick mindset ritual that helps you feeling empowered and ready to tackle anything?
I actually think it's almost a daily ritual for me at this point in time, but probably wasn't when the children were so little. But I'm an early riser. I love getting up early and packing in a few things for myself before the day really starts with the children and the family and the career. So I often try and do some exercise, even if it's only 5 to 10 minutes. I still feel better for having done it. And some meditation, some journaling, and often some learning as well, some form of learning. That might be listening to a podcast, that might be listening to an audio book, or even reading a little bit. I do really love packing some of those things into my mornings, most mornings. It sets me up for a great day.
Definitely does. Just getting that time to yourself in the morning can make such a difference to the rest of your day. So, Belinda, if my listeners would know someone who is maybe at that beginning stage and would like to hear more from you and maybe get a copy of your book or maybe even join your membership, how can they find you?
I'll give you a link to put in the show notes as well for the Baby Circle. That's my online community, and it's my most favorite part of what I do, because I actually get to really support new mums and new parents ongoing. But they could also go to belindajoyce.com. That's my website. I've got a blog there. All the podcast episodes are there. And my book's also available there and at all good bookstores.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Belinda. I will have all those details in the show notes so you can connect with Belinda and drop her any questions you might have along the way. But thank you so much, Belinda. I've really enjoyed having you today to chat.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for being part of this inspiring episode. If you found value in today's discussion, please don't keep it a secret. Share it with a friend on social media, tag me at Your Style Collective, and leave a review. Your support means the world. Join me again next week for another empowering episode of Style and Strategy, the Leadership Series. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember, you're already taking that first step towards your transformation journey. See you next time.